So picture this. You are standing in a, perfectly normal room, and you're staring at a perfectly friendly native English speaker.
Right, low stakes.
Exactly, low stakes.
Mm.
And you spent like 3 hours this morning meticulously reviewing your vocabulary flashcards. You know the grammar rules.
You got it all memorized.
You can literally visualize the textbook page in your
Mhm.
mind's eye. But right now, in this exact second, as you open your mouth to reply to a really simple question, your mind just goes completely, terrifyingly blank.
Oh, the worst feeling.
The words are just gone. You feel your heart rate spike. You offer this strained, awkward smile, and inside your head, you're just screaming at yourself like, "I know this. I literally just studied this."
Yeah, it is a visceral, full-body panic. And it's not just a momentary stutter or, a slight hesitation. It really feels like an absolute surgical erasure of every single thing you've spent months trying to learn.
It's so frustrating.
It is. It's a very specific kind of cognitive paralysis that, frankly, makes you question your own intelligence. Because we operate under this fundamental assumption that, well, if we put the data into our brains, we should just be able to retrieve it on demand.
Exactly. And today, we are exploring the exact biological and psychological reasons why your brain seemingly deletes everything you've learned the very second you actually try to use it.
Which happens to everyone, by the way.
Everyone.
Mhm.
So we are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating, highly structured motivational audio program called Persistence in Progress, Mastering English Motivation. And specifically, we're unpacking an installment hosted by two figures named Emma and Daniel, which is titled, very aptly, Don't Give Up on English.
And, it is crucial to state right up front what our mission is today for this deep dive, because we are not here to teach you English grammar.
Right, no quizzes today.
No quizzes. We are not going to break down the mechanics of the past, perfect continuous tense, or debate prepositional phrases. Instead, we are really dissecting the cognitive survival blueprint that Emma and Daniel have laid out in this source.
Survival blueprint, I like that.
Yeah, because we are looking at the specific psychological frameworks and the daily microscopic habits required to keep you from hitting that wall of frustration, to stop you from throwing your hands up in despair and declaring that your brain just isn't wired for this.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right out of the gate, before offering even a single piece of practical study advice, Emma and Daniel do something incredibly necessary.
They validate the struggle.
They really do. They drag that exact scenario we just talked about, the freezing, the panic, the absolute frustration, right out into the light. They explicitly identify this massive trap that almost every adult learner falls into, which is the belief that input automatically equals output.
Right. The idea that studying equals speaking.
Exactly. Meaning, if I read the chapter, I should be able to speak the words. And when that transaction fails, we don't just feel disappointed. The source notes that we feel isolated, we feel slow, and we feel uniquely broken.
And they start there because they really have to dismantle that false equation immediately. Input does not equal output. Because biologically, those are two entirely different mechanisms in the brain.
Oh, so?
Well, when you are reading a textbook or watching a grammar video, you are engaging your declarative memory. You're just absorbing facts. It's the exact same part of your brain you use to memorize, say, the capital of France or the year the telephone was invented.
Okay, so just storing data.
Right. But speaking a language, that is procedural memory. It is a highly complex motor skill.
Wait, a motor skill, like throwing a baseball or riding a bicycle.
Precisely like that. Think about it. You are coordinating your diaphragm, your vocal cords, your tongue, your lips, and your jaw, all while simultaneously accessing a completely new phonetic database and a new set of syntactic rules in real time. We tend to think of language as purely intellectual, but it is intensely physical. So when Emma and Daniel validate that sequence of failed attempts, the studying, the memorizing, and then the freezing, they are normalizing a biological reality.
We're taking the guilt out of it.
Exactly. They are shifting the blame entirely away from your inherent intelligence. You aren't failing because you aren't smart enough.
Right.
You're failing because you are asking your brain to instantly convert a declarative fact into a fluent motor action, which is, frankly, neurologically impossible.
That reframing alone is massive for me because, if I read 10 books on the physics of water displacement,
Yeah.
and the exact angle my arm needs to be for the butterfly stroke.
You're not going to win a gold medal on day one.
Right. I'm not going to be shocked when I sink like a stone the very first time I jump into the deep end of a pool. I have the input, but I have absolutely zero physical experience with the output. But here is what I don't understand, and what I really want to push back on a little bit. If millions of people are experiencing this exact same disconnect, as the source says, why do we carry so much shame about it? If it's just a biological reality of procedural memory, why do we act like we're the only ones failing?
Well, it's because of how deeply language is tied to our adult identity.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right, because when you sink in a swimming pool, it's pretty obvious to everyone, including yourself, that you simply haven't mastered the physical environment yet. But language is how we project our competence, our humor, our intellect, our status to the world.
It's who we are.
Exactly. And when you strip that away, or when it gets downgraded to the level of a toddler, it triggers a profound vulnerability.
Yeah, right.
We feel isolated in our failure because we fundamentally misunderstand the sheer scale of the unseen biological undertaking happening inside our own skulls. We treat language acquisition like we are just downloading a new software update to a hard drive.
Right, the whole, if I save this file, I can open it later mentality. And when the file won't open, we just assume the hard drive is corrupted.
Yes, precisely. But Emma and Daniel addressed this invisible complexity head-on. They explain that your brain is attempting to execute 3 massive concurrent operations all at once. It is processing entirely new sounds, which, by the way, requires your auditory cortex to literally learn how to hear frequencies it previously ignored.
Which is wild to think about.
It is, and it is processing completely new grammar structures. And perhaps most significantly, they note that it is developing entirely, quote, new ways of thinking.
I really want to stop on that phrase for a second, new ways of thinking, because that is not just a poetic throwaway line in the source material. They actually compare this immense cognitive load to learning to play the piano.
A great analogy.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because when you sit down at a piano for the first time, your left hand is reading the bass clef and doing one rhythm. Your right hand is reading the treble clef and doing a completely different melody, and your foot is managing a sustained pedal.
It's chaos.
It is complete chaos. Your fingers move at a glacial pace. It sounds awful. You're sweating.
It is the perfect analogy because it forces us to recognize the structural rewiring taking place.
Yep.
When you learn English, you aren't just taking your native language and running it through a decoder ring, just swapping out one word for another.
Like a one-to-one translation.
Right. That doesn't work that way. Different languages categorize the physical and emotional world differently. They prioritize different information. Some languages require you to state the gender of every object. Some require you to fundamentally alter verbs based on your social relationship to the person you are speaking to.
Right. The formality changes everything.
Exactly. You are structurally rewiring your neural pathways to perceive reality through a different lens. That is what new ways of thinking means.
So it really is an Olympic-level gymnastics routine for your central nervous system. Which brings me back to you, the listener, right now. Let's say it's a Tuesday night. You've just worked a 10-hour shift. The kids are finally asleep, and you are staring at a screen trying to learn English.
You're exhausted.
You feel totally exhausted, and you feel like the language is just fighting you at every single step. What does this cognitive load mean for that specific person in that moment?
It means that the friction you are experiencing is not a symptom of your failure. The friction actually is the feeling of your brain building new neural architecture. It is the metabolic cost of neuroplasticity.
Oh, I love that. The metabolic cost.
Yeah, think about when you go to the gym and lift heavy weights. Your muscles burn and they feel weak the next day. You don't take that as a sign that your body is fundamentally broken, right? You take it as the necessary biological cost of muscle growth.
You expect the soreness.
Exactly. And Emma and Daniel are asking you to apply that exact same grace to your brain. If English feels agonizingly difficult right now, it means you are in the active phase of learning.
That is such a profound relief to wrap your head around. Because if we accept that language is this multifaceted, physical, coordinative, and conceptual rewiring process, just like learning to physically command an intricate instrument, then it becomes blindingly obvious why demanding instant fluency from yourself is a recipe for absolute misery.
You're just setting yourself up to fail.
Right. You wouldn't scream at yourself for failing to play a Chopin nocturne after 3 weeks of piano lessons. So you shouldn't expect to effortlessly debate economic policy in English after a few months of studying.
And accepting that timeline is critical because once you understand the sheer magnitude of what the brain is doing, you realize that the aggressive pacing we usually demand of ourselves is actually counterproductive. And that logical progression leads us directly into the source's incredibly specific, entirely mathematical approach to pacing.
Yes, let's get into the math,
Yeah.
because this completely upends how most people study. We live in a culture of extreme instant gratification, right? We want next-day delivery, we want high-speed internet, and we desperately want the learn English in 30 days promise.
Which is a myth.
A total myth. But Daniel steps in here and forcefully outlines what actual biological progress looks like. He says progress might be learning 5 new words today, not 50, 5. It might be understanding the context of one short 1-minute video. Or, most radically, he says progress might just be successfully speaking one single sentence out loud.
They're introducing what is functionally the 1% rule. The premise is that you only need to improve by a marginal, almost imperceptible 1% every day to see exponential results over a few months. As they stated in the audio program, success is not about big steps. It's about small steps repeated every day.
Wow.
Now, what's fascinating here from a behavioral psychology standpoint is the deliberate shift they are making. They are moving the learner away from qualitative emotional metrics and forcing them to adopt quantitative objective metrics.
Okay, unpack that. What do you mean by qualitative emotional metrics?
Well, usually when you ask someone how their language learning is going, they answer with a feeling. They say, I feel like my accent is terrible, or I felt so stupid talking to the barista today.
Guilty. I've definitely said things like that.
We all do. But those are qualitative judgments driven entirely by transient emotions. By defining progress as successfully speaking a single sentence, Emma and Daniel are completely lowering the barrier to entry. They are guaranteeing that the learner can experience a tangible, undeniable victory every single day.
Because anyone can say one sentence.
Exactly. If your definition of success is fluency, then you are going to go to bed feeling like a failure for 999 days in a row until you finally hit that threshold. But if your definition of success is, I spoke one new sentence today, you go to bed a winner.
And winning feels good. That has to do something chemically in the brain, right? Like there's a biological reward there.
Absolutely. It triggers a dopamine release. And dopamine isn't just the pleasure chemical. It is the molecule of motivation and forward drive. When you achieve a highly achievable, goal-like speaking one sentence, your brain releases a small pulse of dopamine, which physically wires you to want to repeat that exact same action tomorrow.
You hacking your own motivation.
You are creating a sustainable biochemical feedback loop.
I want to visualize this 1% rule because sometimes the math feels, I don't know, too abstract. Imagine you are walking through a dense, overgrown jungle with a machete. That jungle is your brain trying to navigate English.
You like this?
On day 1, you swing the machete and you cut down a single vine. You look around and you are still completely surrounded by dense jungle. It feels like you accomplished absolutely nothing. That's your 5 vocabulary words.
Right. It feels pointless in the moment.
Exactly. But if you walk that exact same path and cut one single vine every single day, eventually you carve a clear, walkable trail. The compounding effect of small actions over time is explosive. I mean, 5 words a day feels pathetic in the moment, but 5 words a day is over 1,800 words in a year.
Which is huge.
It's massive.
Right.
So that is a highly functional conversational vocabulary built entirely from microscopic daily effort.
That is the principle of compound neuroplasticity. You are carving the trail.
Oh, my.
However, despite the mathematical certainty of the 1% rule, and despite the biochemical advantages of lowering the bar, there is a very specific human flaw that derails almost everyone who tries this method.
Right. Because I can sit here and agree with the math all day. I can know that my 5 words are compounding, but the second I look up from my little freshly cut jungle trail, I see someone else driving past me on a fully paved 4-lane linguistic highway.
Yep, there it is.
I see a colleague effortlessly telling a joke in English, capturing the nuance, making everyone laugh. And instantly, my 5 vocabulary words feel completely worthless. The dopamine vanishes. Which brings us to the source's incredibly stark warning about the absolute toxicity of comparison.
Emma specifically identifies this exact moment of sabotage. She describes the scenario where you watch someone speak perfect English, and the immediate involuntary thought that floods your mind is, my English will never be that good.
Such a universal feeling.
It really is. And this is where Daniel intervenes in their discussion to remind learners about the danger of invisible variables. When you observe someone speaking fluently, you are only witnessing the final, polished product of their labor.
The highlight reel, basically.
Exactly, the highlight reel.
No.
You are completely blind to their starting line. You don't know that they might have begun their journey 7 years before you did. You don't know if they had access to native-speaking parents, or if they had the financial luxury of studying for 4 hours a day with a private tutor.
You don't see the struggles.
More importantly, you don't see the thousands of hours of agonizing, embarrassing mistakes they made in private. Comparing your day 30 to someone else's year 5 is not just unhelpful, it is a fundamental misrepresentation of data.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second. We hear a lot of platitudes about how comparison is the thief of joy. But in the real world, isn't a little bit of healthy competition actually a good thing?
In what sense?
Like if I'm in a language class and I see the person next to me advancing way faster, doesn't that light a fire under me? Deadlines and competition cause stress, and stress makes me work harder. Why should I just stay in my own little lane if a rival can push me to be better?
It's a very common pushback, and it makes intuitive sense. But we have to look at the specific physiological response to stress in the context of memory acquisition. Deadlines and competition absolutely force action. They might make you stay up until 2 a.m. staring at a book.
Right, cramming.
But linguistic retention is deeply affected by what linguists call the affective filter, which is inextricably linked to your stress hormones.
Okay, wait, what is the affective filter actually doing?
Think of the affective filter as an emotional gateway in your brain that determines how much new language data is allowed to enter your memory banks. When you are relaxed and motivated, the filter is wide open. Data flows in freely.
Like a sponge.
Yes, but when you introduce competition, you introduce anxiety. Anxiety triggers the release of cortisol, which is the primary stress hormone. High levels of cortisol literally impair the function of the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for forming new memories.
Oh, wow. So it physically blocks the learning.
It does. So your healthy competition is actually raising your stress hormones to a level that chemically blocks your brain from retaining the vocabulary you are trying to force into it. The source is absolutely correct when they state that your journey is unique because from a biological standpoint, external comparison actively sabotages the machinery of learning.
That is wild. So by stressing out over someone else's fluency, I am physically preventing my own brain from storing the words I need to catch up to them. I'm literally getting in my own way.
Precisely. Which is why the only valid, scientifically sound metric for motivation that Emma and Daniel provide is the self-audit. They establish the ultimate rule. The only person you should compare yourself with is your past self.
That's powerful.
The question is simply, am I better than I was last month? Not last year, not yesterday, but last month. That timeline allows for enough distance to actually see the 1% compounding effect.
So if the only valid metric is checking if you are better than you were 30 days ago, you have to actually ensure that you are getting better, right? You can't just cross your fingers and hope the neuroplasticity is happening on its own.
Yeah, you definitely need a system.
Right, you need an executable system. And this is where the source makes a major pivot. They move from building a psychological defense against anxiety to launching a practical daily offensive strategy. Emma and Daniel lay out a framework for how to structure your practice without burning yourself out, and it relies on one core mantra. Consistency is more important than intensity.
This is perhaps the most liberating, counterintuitive piece of advice in their entire program. Most adult learners operate under what I call the heroic effort fallacy.
The heroic effort fallacy.
Yeah, we think that if a goal is massive, like learning a language, the effort required on any given day must also be massive. But the source explicitly tells learners that they do not need to study for 5 hours a day. In fact, they argue that just 10 or 15 minutes of daily practice makes a, quote, big difference.
Which is a massive relief. Because let's look at the reality of the heroic effort. If you convince yourself that you need a solid 3-hour block to properly study English, what actually happens?
You never do it.
Exactly. You look at your schedule on Monday and you say, well, I have to make dinner and do laundry. I don't have 3 free hours. I'll just skip it today and do it tomorrow. Then Tuesday comes and you have to work late. I'll do it on the weekend. And suddenly an entire month has evaporated and you haven't looked at a single English word.
The requirement of intensity becomes the exact excuse for inaction.
Exactly. The 15-minute rule completely destroys the barrier of excuses. Nobody, no matter how demanding their career or family life is completely incapable of finding 10 minutes in a 24-hour cycle.
Everyone has 10 minutes, but there is a deeper neurological reason why 15 minutes every single day is vastly superior to a single 5-hour binge on Sunday afternoon.
Tell me, because my instinct still says 5 hours of work is better than 1 hour spread over a week. Yeah. The sheer volume has to count for something, right?
It actually comes down to how the brain consolidates memory during sleep. Throughout the day, as you encounter new information, your brain holds it in a temporary workspace. But it's during sleep that your brain physically strengthens those new neural connections.
Okay, so sleep is crucial.
Yes. Crucially, your brain is highly efficient. It prunes away information it deems irrelevant. If you study for 5 hours on Sunday and then ignore English for the next 6 days, your brain interprets that Sunday as a freak, isolated stress event.
Wait, really?
Yes. It thinks, well, we haven't needed this information all week, so it must not be vital for survival, and it literally begins to prune those pathways.
Wow. So the binge actually triggers the brain to forget it. That is mind-blowing.
It's counterproductive. But if you interact with English for just 15 minutes every single day, you are sending a completely different signal to your nervous system. You are telling your brain, I am encountering this stimulus every single time the sun comes up. This is a permanent feature of my environment. This is essential for my daily survival.
So it locks it in.
Exactly. The daily frequency forces the brain to lock the pathways in permanently. It's known as the spacing effect. Emma and Daniel aren't just giving you a time-saving hack. They are aligning your practice with your brain's evolutionary imperative to adapt to recurring stimuli.
That is fascinating. It's like tending to a garden. You can't just dump 100 gallons of water on a seed on Sunday and then abandon it for a month. You will drown the seed, and then the soil will dry out and crack.
It'll die, yeah.
You have to give it a little bit of water, just enough to moisten the soil every single day, allowing the roots to slowly reach deeper. And the source gives very specific bite-sized habits for this daily watering. They suggest things like listen to a short English podcast, repeat a few sentences out loud, describe your daily routine in English.
Notice what those habits have in common. They are highly active, but they are incredibly brief. The specific goal of these short bursts, as Emma and Daniel note, is to train your brain to think in English naturally. You are trying to weave the language into the existing fabric of your day rather than treating it as a heavy, separate burden that you have to pick up and carry.
But here's the inevitable collision course. If you take their advice and you start speaking these sentences out loud every day, trying to describe your routine, you are inevitably going to mess up.
Oh, constantly.
You are going to use the wrong tense, you're going to mangle a pronunciation, or you're going to completely forget the word for refrigerator. And this brings us face to face with what the source identifies as the absolute primary silencer of the adult language learner: the sheer paralyzing fear of the mistake.
This is the great paradox of adult learning. We intellectually understand that making mistakes is part of learning, but emotionally, we treat mistakes as a profound failure of character.
We take it so personally.
We really do. The text notes that this fear is exactly what keeps learners completely silent. We calculate the risk, and we decide that we would rather say absolutely nothing and maintain the illusion of competence than open our mouths, make a grammatical error, and look foolish.
It is the ultimate defense mechanism. But Emma and Daniel provide a really beautiful reframing for this. They ask us to look at children who are learning their very first language.
The ultimate language learners.
Undeniably, kids are the undisputed champions of language acquisition. And what is their methodology? They make countless, hilarious, nonsensical, entirely embarrassing mistakes all day long. They invent words, they mess up plurals, they mispronounce everything.
And they don't care at all.
Right. Crucially, and this is the absolute anchor point from the source, they keep speaking. They do not get embarrassed, apologize to the room, and vow never to speak again until they are fluent. And because they keep speaking, their language rapidly improves. Daniel states it like a fundamental law of physics. Every mistake teaches you something new.
To give this some scientific weight, let's return to the concept of the affective filter we discussed earlier. Children possess a remarkably low affective filter. They simply do not possess the cognitive development required to care about social status or judgment.
Their ego isn't involved.
Exactly. Their ego is not tied to their syntax. Adults, on the other hand, have a massive, thick, highly reactive affective filter built from decades of social conditioning. The source uses the child analogy not to say act like a toddler, but to try and help you consciously decouple your adult ego from your linguistic output.
Which is easier said than done.
Of course. But what's vital to understand here is that the text doesn't offer a gentle platitude like, try not to make mistakes, but don't beat yourself up if you do. It goes much further. It embraces the mistake as the actual necessary engine of learning. Without the mistake, you aren't testing the boundaries of your knowledge, which means those boundaries never expand.
But let me explore the brutal reality of that for a second. It is so easy for a motivational audio program to tell me to embrace mistakes. It sounds great on paper. But as adults living in a highly competitive real world, we absolutely despise sounding incompetent.
Right, the stakes feel high.
They do. If you are a 35-year-old manager leading a business meeting, or you are trying to negotiate a contract, or even if you are just on a first date, the fear of sounding unintelligent is a very real, very physical sensation. The social cost feels enormous. My amygdala is screaming at me that I am losing status.
It's a threat response.
How do we actually practically push through that? We can't just magically turn off our adult pride.
You are hitting on the exact friction point that makes language learning so uniquely agonizing. Your amygdala is processing that social embarrassment as a literal survival threat, triggering a fight or flight response. And you are right, you cannot simply wish away your adult ego.
So what do we do?
Well, Emma and Daniel anticipate this exact pushback. They know you can't just throw yourself into a high-stakes corporate negotiation in English and embrace looking foolish. So the source provides a highly structured, strategic answer for adult anxiety. You must artificially scaffold your confidence.
Scaffold it, like building the support structure for a building.
Exactly. Emma explicitly states that confidence doesn't just spontaneously generate out of thin air. It has to be manufactured incrementally in safe environments. You don't build confidence by jumping into the deep end. You build it by mastering the shallower end so thoroughly that the deep end stops looking terrifying.
And Daniel gives the literal blueprint for this scaffolding. He provides exact word-for-word examples of where every learner should start. He suggests utilizing short, undeniable micro-sentences. Things like, I like this, or I'm tired today, or this is interesting.
Very simple statements.
Right. He says that relying on these incredibly short sentences makes the learner feel comfortable, which naturally allows them to evolve into longer, more complex thoughts later.
Let's truly unpack the brilliance of those three specific examples the source provided, because they are not random at all. Let's look at them. I like this is a statement of personal preference. I'm tired today is a statement expressing an internal state of being. This is interesting, is an external observation. What do all three of these have in common?
They are short.
Yes, but more importantly, they are entirely autonomous, complete thoughts that require virtually zero cognitive load to execute.
Ah, I see.
They require no grammatical gymnastics. You don't have to worry about subordinate clauses or matching complex verb tenses or navigating tricky prepositions. Yet, despite their simplicity, by deploying these sentences in a conversation, they allow the learner to safely occupy social space.
You're in the game.
You are actively participating, you are vocalizing, you are asserting your presence in the room, but your exposure to linguistic risk is almost zero.
It's like pouring the concrete foundation for a bridge. You don't start building a bridge by trying to hang the massive suspension cables over open water. That is terrifying and incredibly dangerous.
Then collapse.
You start by pouring the simplest, heaviest, strongest concrete footings deep into the dirt on the shore. I like this. That is a concrete footing. I'm tired today. That is a footing. You plant your feet firmly on those undeniable statements, and suddenly you are an English speaker. You belong in the conversation. You aren't silent anymore.
I mean, yeah, that is just a perfectly fitting analogy. You are building the infrastructure of participation.
But once you have those footings poured, once you master these short micro-sentences, how do you accelerate the process? How do you move beyond the absolute basics without retreating back to your desk to stare at a grammar textbook for another 3 hours?
The source argues that the next crucial evolutionary step is completely shattering the rigid boundary between study time and living time.
Okay, blending the two.
Yes. Emma and Daniel introduce the concept of immersion, but they do it in a way that is highly accessible for a busy adult. They suggest passive consumption, of course, listening to English music in the background, watching English videos, reading simple stories.
The usual stuff.
Right. But their absolute most powerful, transformative recommendation is the practice of active internal narration, cultivating a continuous internal monologue in English.
Yes. Thinking in English during the absolute most mundane, boring tasks of your day. The examples they give are beautifully ordinary. Actively thinking to yourself, I'm making coffee, or I'm walking outside. They argue that doing this actively trains the brain in these tiny microscopic moments throughout your day.
I want to zero in on this internal monologue technique because saying, I am making coffee inside your own head is a profound cognitive trick. Think about the unparalleled safety of this environment. It requires absolutely zero conversation
I
partners.
can hear you mess up.
Exactly. It carries a literal 0% risk of public embarrassment, completely bypassing the effective filter we talked about. But neurologically, it is forcing your brain to retrieve vocabulary and construct syntax in real-time, real-world contexts.
And it bypasses the translation trap.
Yes, exactly. Most learners see a coffee pot, think the word for coffee in their native language, and then translate it into English. By internally narrating the physical action as you do it, you are linking the sensory experience of pouring hot water directly to the English terminology. You are forcing the language out of the textbook and anchoring it to your physical reality.
And this connects so perfectly, so seamlessly back to their 10 to 15-minute rule. Because if you are secretly narrating your coffee making for 2 minutes in the morning, and then narrating your 5-minute walk to the bus stop, and then narrating yourself washing the dishes after dinner,
It adds up fast.
you are accumulating those 15 minutes completely effortlessly. You don't have to block out calendar time. You don't have to cancel plans. You are just living your normal life. But you are living it with an English voiceover running in your head. It completely eliminates the "I don't have time" excuse.
It does. By integrating English into these tiny invisible moments, the learner is essentially planting seeds continuously throughout their day. But here is where the source offers a vital, sobering piece of psychological preparation.
The warning.
The warning, yes. Emma and Daniel warn that the growth of these seeds will not always be visible to the naked eye. In fact, for agonizingly long stretches of time, it will look and feel like absolutely nothing is happening at all. This leads us directly into the final and undoubtedly the most difficult psychological hurdle the source addresses, surviving the progress plateau.
The plateau. The dreaded, suffocating feeling of being totally, hopelessly stuck. The source openly acknowledges this specific phase where learners are doing everything right. They are putting in the daily 15 minutes, they are running the internal monologue, they're using their micro-sentences, but they deeply, genuinely believe they have stopped improving.
They hit a wall.
They have hit a wall, and the motivation just drains right out of them. But Emma and Daniel reveal the great secret of the plateau. Progress hasn't stopped. It is actually still happening, but it's happening so deeply under the surface that it is totally imperceptible in the moment.
To understand why the plateau feels so static, we have to look at what is physically happening in the brain during this phase. This is a process called myelination.
Myelination.
Yes. When you repeatedly practice a skill like your internal monologue, your brain recognizes that this neural pathway is important. So it begins to wrap that specific pathway in a fatty substance called myelin. Myelin acts like the rubber insulation around an electrical wire. It prevents the electrical signal from leaking out, which allows the signal to travel vastly faster and with less effort.
So during the plateau, I'm not necessarily learning new vocabulary words, but I am upgrading the wiring for the words I already know.
Precisely. You are building the high-speed infrastructure. You don't feel like you are improving because your vocabulary count isn't skyrocketing, but internally your brain is furiously optimizing the pathways, making them more efficient.
That makes so much sense.
The text promises that the payoff for trusting this invisible, frustrating phase is sudden and profound. Emma says, one day, you suddenly understand a conversation, or you speak a sentence without thinking. That phrase right there, speak a sentence without thinking. That is the ultimate holy grail definition of fluency.
The dream.
It is the exact moment a skill moves from requiring conscious, agonizing effort to becoming an effortless, subconscious reflex.
I want you, the listener, to think about that feeling for a second. Think about a time in your life when you experienced a sudden, inexplicable leap in a physical skill. Maybe it was learning to drive a manual transmission car, or hitting a tennis serve, or even playing a complex video game.
Where it just clicks.
Right. You felt completely stuck and uncoordinated for weeks, constantly fumbling the timing, overthinking every single movement, and then you woke up one Tuesday, you got behind the wheel or picked up the racket, and your hands just knew what to do without you actively commanding them.
Muscle memory takes over.
That aha moment is very real. And I just love how much empathetic understanding this source has for the invisible phase of learning. They aren't just barking orders at you. They are sitting with you in the dark parts of the journey, explaining the mechanics of the tunnel you are in.
It is a remarkably compassionate and yet scientifically rigorous approach to education. And as we pull back and synthesize the core insights we've extracted from Emma and Daniel's program today, a very clear, cohesive philosophy emerges.
What's the big takeaway?
It is a complete, uncompromising rejection of perfectionism. It is a reliance on the mathematical certainty of the 1% rule and compound neuroplasticity. It's the biological understanding that 15 minutes of daily, spaced repetition will always defeat a 5-hour, guilt-driven study binge.
Consistency over intensity.
Always. It's the tactical use of micro-sentences like, I like this, to build an impenetrable foundation of social confidence. And ultimately, it's about having the neurological faith to trust the invisible myelination happening underneath the frustrating surface of the plateau.
It really is a survival guide for your motivation. It takes the blame off your shoulders and puts the focus on the process. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the source material, I want to relay the final, incredibly powerful message that Emma and Daniel left for their audience.
Such a good quote.
They stated, every sentence you practice, every word you learn, every mistake you make is helping you improve. And they actually ended their session by turning the microphone around and asking for engagement, and we want to pass that exact same question directly on to you. What is your biggest challenge when learning English? Or whatever language you might be wrestling with right now.
Think about it objectively.
Take a moment today to really define what that barrier is for you. Is it the affective filter? Is it the heroic effort fallacy?
And as you reflect on your own barriers, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. It builds on everything we've unpacked from the text today, but takes it one conceptual step further.
Let's hear it.
Early on, the source mentioned that learning a language means learning new ways of thinking. If that is biologically true, if different languages structurally rewire how you categorize reality, and you are spending your days actively narrating your life in English, saying, I am making coffee in your head instead of thinking it in your native tongue,
Right.
are you really just learning a new communication tool? Or are you actually slowly, unavoidably developing a slightly new version of yourself? Does your personality change when your syntax does? Something to think about the next time you pour that cup of coffee.
Wow. From your words vanishing in a panic when you try to speak, to literally speaking a new personality into existence. That is quite the journey. Stick with your 15 minutes a day, embrace the biological necessity of your mistakes, and keep carving those new pathways. Until next time.